Welcome to our posts. Today we will see stories of r/malicious compliance. Boss told me I couldn't take a smoke break if I wasn't smoking. I first started working at 17 as a housekeeper cleaning condos in downtown Toronto. It wasn't a bad gig. The building was under construction, finishing units and such, so there was quite a bit of dust, but other than that it was fairly easy work, and at the time I was getting above minimum wage. I was the only cleaner in the building, but I was good friends with the security guards and would hang out with them on most of my breaks. They were all smokers, and I noticed that they were taking small breaks, so if I happened to be near them when they were taking a smoke break, I would hang out with them. My boss was a sweet guy, but he did casually mention that the smoke breaks for smokers only and I couldn't just hang out with them. Next break I sat down with the security guards and they joked that I should just have a cigarette in my hand but not actually smoke it. That's when I decided to be a little bit creative with my malicious compliance. The next day I came into work with a small pack of sparklers. I kept them in my pocket, and when I saw the security guards taking a smoke break, I went out with them, pulled out a sparkler, lit it up, and just kind of stood there with them as the sparkler went off. We all had a good chuckle about it. The boss saw me and came outside, probably to talk to me about not taking a smoke break if I wasn't a smoker, but he saw the sparkler in my hand. The security guards pointed out that technically I was smoking as the sparkler was producing little bits of smoke. The boss laughed it off, apologized, and said that as long as I get my work done I can take smoke breaks with the others, with or without the sparklers. Next story. They refused me an office, I complied, they regretted it. I got my first grown-up job while I was finishing my bachelor's degree. I was just getting started in a highly technical and emerging field. Very few people back then were doing this kind of work, and I seemed to have an aptitude for it, which is probably why I got a job before I had any credentials. The department I was hired for was brand new and had the potential to take customers from other departments, while also generating net new business. Interestingly, the other departments had been offered the opportunity to start the service themselves but refused, even actively trying to prevent it from happening. That's the reason I ended up in a malicious compliance situation. The leaders of all the other departments conspired to prevent me from getting an office. I didn't understand at first because at that age I didn't imagine professionals did petty, immature things. When I realized what was happening, I knew they'd get exposed if I went along with it. So I happily did my job wherever I could find a place, which often ended up being in the mailroom, where lots of people would notice. I hoped maybe the leaders would start to feel guilty or annoyed and change their minds. Or they'd be caught by their bosses. Either way, problem solved for me without a fight. Little did I know how well it would go. I started to be well liked by a lot of the leaders because I helped them with their computers. There was one leader who still inexplicably hated me. I never spoke with him, not even one word. But he continued to insist I did not need an office. I wasn't even the level of a secretary, according to him, which I took to be a dig at my lack of a degree. I heard about him saying that from a friend who was in the meeting when they talked about changing their minds. It's too bad for them they didn't change their minds, because the president came through the mailroom multiple times and finally stopped, clearly annoyed. Why don't you work in your office? That was my golden moment. I had complied politely with not having an office. I sweetly told the president, I don't have an office. What? Why not? There isn't room. No space available. According to whom? Mr. So-and-so. But you've been working here for, 3 months? They could have found space for you by now. Oh, the president was beet red at that point. I just smiled and said my understanding is there is no space. The president literally stomped upstairs to the offices of Mr. So-and-so. I distinctly heard the yelling from downstairs. People outside probably heard it. The president came and brought me upstairs to the conference room where the leaders were all seated looking down. There was a pile of keys on the table. I was afraid at that point. Was she having me pick someone's office to take? While that might have been sweet revenge, it wouldn't have been good for my working relationships with any of them. But no. She handed me a key to the conference room and said, "This is your office." She scooped up the rest of the keys, which I learned later were all their copies of the key to the conference room, and said, "Your office is the largest office on campus. Even bigger than mine." Enjoy. And she walked out. That was probably the best drop the mic moment I've ever seen in my life. And the story ends with my compliance not only winning me that office, but all the other leaders, except Mr. So-and-so, becoming great colleagues. Next story. You want me to work at full capacity? No problem. Can you tell my colleagues to say goodbye to their bonuses? Thanks. I work in a help desk call center as a first-line agent, on purpose. My job is easy. We work from home where users can call/email/chat us and we fix their most basic computer problems, often resolved by a restart or a redeployment of some sort. I took this job on purpose to get away from a very stressful career that killed my social life, and frankly my will to live. This job costs me exactly zero energy, giving me the space and energy to have the social life I've always dreamed of. The pay in this job is based on the languages you provide help in, and because of my language skills, and a promotion I'm not allowed to tell my colleagues about, I make more than anyone else in my team. For this simple reason, I refuse to take any promotions that bring more stress but are not financially compensated, causing me to have worked in first line for 3-5 years now while most of my colleagues have had promotions. Because this company has a huge turnover, I often get new colleagues/managers. I usually train the new colleagues and have a friendly, cordial relationship with the managers, but I always try to stay private and reserved as much as possible to save all my energy for after-work activities. Most days I don't talk to anyone. I log in, I work on the tickets/calls/emails for 50% of the time, while studying/reading, watching movies, or listening to music the rest of the time. What's important to know for this story is that we can get a bonus of up to 10% of our monthly income, depending on our productivity. I always get the 10%, but for some newer colleagues it's difficult because the limits are pretty high. If I like a colleague, I will sometimes help them by closing tickets in their name. I also usually take the more challenging tickets and leave the easier ones for the newer team members. Further bit of information is that the company I work for has their help desk for 12 languages, so to cover all the languages we have a team of 8. So now to the malicious compliance. One of the people I trained became the new team leader, which I actually encouraged. The guy is exactly the manager type and understands the job. Unfortunately, the pressure from the operations manager, OM, got to him and he started checking our stats, noticing that for about 4 hours per day there is no activity from me. I explained to him that this is on purpose to give everyone a chance to get their bonus and that my output is still higher than anyone else in the team. He also noticed that I sometimes close tickets in my colleague's name for which I couldn't give him the real reason cause it's a sort of fraud. I just told him I rush sometimes and just don't notice. He told me no more relaxing times, and no more closing tickets in others' names. He actually said he would be checking up on me to make sure I work the full 8 hours I'm paid for. I explained to him that this was a very bad idea, that the team is doing really well and the current status quo is perfectly balanced and he shouldn't upset it, but he was young and reckless. Fine. For the next 2 months I worked at full capacity. Where normally there was a good balance of closing tickets and everyone getting a fair shot at their bonus. Now all of a sudden I did about 70% of the work, leaving very little for my colleagues. Who, except for one other, both months didn't qualify for their bonuses, causing huge conflicts in the team. I tried to stay out of it but was soon accused of stealing all my colleagues' tickets and not giving them a chance to earn their bonuses. I replied professionally to all the accusations via email, making sure to CC all relevant managers, including the operations manager. After the 2 months our new team leader was reassigned and the status quo returned as it was. Next story. It's not my fault, but I'll find a solution. When I was in college, I got a second job during the summer at a restaurant. During my interview, I had told them that I could not work specific days because I was working at my other job. On my 3rd week, they scheduled me to work on my off days. I had talked to them and they gave me a list of numbers of other servers to find someone to take the shift. I was able to get my shift covered. The next week, the same thing happened. Now, I hated this job. I've worked plenty of restaurants before and this one was a cry before work, during work, and after work kind of job. I told the manager that the day I had been scheduled for a day that was not in my availability twice now. The manager said, "Well, I'm not saying it's your fault, but it's not our fault, so you need to find a solution." I contacted every employee at both jobs. No one could cover either shift. I worked my next shift at the restaurant and as I was cashing out, I told my manager I was done and this was my last shift. He goes, "So you're just not doing the 2 weeks?" And I said, "You told me to find a solution and I did." I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share and subscribe the channel or posts.